Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Chew on That. For those of you guys who celebrate, Merry Christmas. For those of you guys who don't, Happy Holidays. I hope you're having a great time and staying safe wherever you are. So today we have one of my favorite true crime stories ever. It is unsolved, it is creepy, it is unsettling. We are going to discuss the case of Elisa Lam. So if you guys have been following me for a few years, you know that years ago I had a podcast called True Crime Tea, and I covered this on that show as well. So I've done a new updated version of it to bring you to chew on that. I wanted to make sure that, you know, going with a new format for YouTube, I had something familiar, but I didn't want to just like copy paste it, so I wanted to redo it. So we're back, we're better than ever. If you've heard the story and you're like me, you'll love it no matter how many times you hear it. If this is your first time listening, you're in for a wild ride. So first, I do want to give credit where credit is due. So right now, one woman show, plan on going forward with that for pretty much ever. Like maybe occasionally someone will help, but for the most part I do this on my own. I am recording with an iPhone 11 using Switcher Studio, so that way you guys know how I am doing this. So let's go ahead and kick into the fun. So first, who is Elisa Lam? So Elisa Lam was the daughter of Hong Kong immigrants David and Yenna Lam, and they moved to Vancouver from Hong Kong. They opened a restaurant called Paul's Restaurant in Burnaby, and they wound up having a couple of kids, one of which was Elisa. So she was born April 30th, 1991 in Vancouver. Like a lot of Chinese citizens, she had both a Chinese name and an English name. So her Chinese name, which was her fully legal name, was Lam Ho Yi. But her English name that she was given at birth and that she went by growing up in Canada was Elisa. So that's how she came known as Elisa Lam, and most people would call her Elisa. That's just how she got around. Unless she was visiting China or talking specifically to Chinese relatives, then she might go by her Chinese name. So by all accounts, Elisa was a very kind and sweet person. One of those people where normally, you know, you can dig up dirt on someone, and Elisa's not really that person. She kept her nose clean. She was a very smart student. She did well in her adolescence, and she wound up applying to and being accepted by the University of British Columbia. I looked online. I couldn't find what her major is. As someone who has, you know, focused on this case for almost 8 years now, I've never heard what her major was. So it might be out there somewhere. I did find her LinkedIn. It just listed she was a student, but very smart girl. She was doing well in college no matter what she was studying, from everything that I can see. So Elisa, after doing a few years at the University of British Columbia, decided she wanted a little bit of a break, and she elected to take a semester off starting in January 2013 to do what she called a West Coast tour. So if you guys don't know, Vancouver is on the west coast of Canada. It's right above Washington. So if you guys are looking at this map and you're seeing where Washington State is, you know, it's a hop, skip, and a jump to get to British Columbia, where Vancouver is. So what Elisa wanted to do was travel down the US coast, specifically California, and then return home. And she created a Tumblr by the name of Nouveau Nouvelle, which at this point has been discontinued. The last time I covered this story, back in 2017, it was still up. At this point, Tumblr has been scrubbing a lot of inactive accounts, and Nouveau Nouvelle, unfortunately, is gone. You can find a couple of screenshots on Google Image, but, you know, it was just her normal blog where she posted about fashion and food and everything like that, and she wanted to extensively cover the details of her West Coast tour on this Tumblr. And the big thing was Elisa wanted to do this tour alone. So she did not want to have to listen to anyone about let's go here, let's not go here, let's go there. She didn't want to have to plan her day around anyone else. She wanted this to be 100% her trip, and that's what she set out to do, and that's what she informed her parents of. So as you can imagine, parents of 21-year-old college student who's taking a year, not a year off, a semester off, David and Yenna were not a fan of this West Coast tour idea, especially that she would be alone, she'd be in a different country. You know, it doesn't matter that they're back to back, you know, going to a different country, you know, shakes up a lot of parents. It's just normal. But Elisa assured them, you know, hey, 21, I'll be fine, it's straight down. I will call you daily. I will update my blog at least once a day. You'll know what's going on. I'll let you guys know if I get into any jams. Here's my, you know, loose itinerary. And, you know, it wasn't really a thing where she had to ask permission because she was a legal adult. But she still wanted her parents' acceptance for this. She didn't want a big fight. And eventually David and Yenna relented and they were like, okay, Elisa, just make sure that you're safe. Make sure you keep us up to date. You know, please don't let anything happen to you and have fun. And she was excited. She gets to do her West Coast tour. Yay! So Elisa starts off in San Diego, California. She flies out to San Diego on January 22nd, 2013. And when she arrives, she uses Amtrak and city buses to get around San Diego. Now, Elisa quickly fell in love with San Diego. Her blog had a huge post about the San Diego Zoo and a bunch of pictures she took there and how much fun she was having. She was taking selfies all around the city as she went around San Diego. She also met a guy there who was also traveling. They were a little flirty. It was a mutual crush, but it didn't go anywhere beyond that. So after she'd been in San Diego for 4 days, she departed on January 26th, 2013 alone. The crush was not there. They have confirmed through like surveillance and everything he did not go with her. No one went with her. She left by herself to go to her next stop, which was Los Angeles, California. So another big, great city. I have yet to visit San Diego, but I've been to Los Angeles, specifically the kind of like downtown entertainment areas, and Anaheim, which is a suburb, numerous times. The downtown area is okay. Anaheim I adore. I love going to Anaheim, so I understand her excitement to be going to LA, and San Diego is also on my bucket list, so I can see why she enjoyed it so much as well. So Elisa ends up arriving in Los Angeles, California on January 26th, 2013. And to save on money, she chose to stay in a budget hotel called the Cecil. Now, the Cecil was in an area of LA known as Skid Row, which I have not personally been to on my own. It's not really on my radar of places to go, and here is why. So, Skid Row is a neighborhood in downtown LA. Population is just under 4,800 people, and it has one of the largest stable homeless populations in the United States. So Skid Row has a long history of police raids and targeted city initiatives and homeless advocacy. There have been a bunch of like stamp out crime things that go on there, and they do work while they're in action, and then as soon as they end, things kind of go back to normal. But this area covers 50 city blocks, so it's a huge area. And again, you know, it's just a huge poverty-stricken homeless area in LA, which when you think of California in particular, and you know, LA with the Hollywood sign, you expect some homelessness, but not this much, and that's what you get from Skid Row. As you can imagine, minorities kind of rule over Skid Row. So the last statistics I could find were It's 58% black, 25% Hispanic, 13% white, and then you have almost traces of Native American, Pacific Islander, including Hawaiians and Asians. And then you have other, which are just anyone who doesn't fit in those categories, really. But that covers pretty much everything. So, you know, unfortunately, hugely minority-stricken area of Skid Row. The per capita income is just over $14,000, which is what I was making as like a manager at Spencer's Gifts back in like 2012. So not a good salary. And that was a job I had for just high school and college mainly. And this is what people, you know, are living on. Like, this is their full yearly salary as a family. And the median household income of Skid Row is just $15,000. So these people really do not have any money. They, you know, very impoverished area. 41.8% are below the national poverty line. So over half are, you know, just not doing so well. And as a result, anything in Skid Row is very inexpensive, including the budget hotel formerly known as the Cecil. And if the Cecil sounds familiar to you, there is a reason for that, ladies and gentlemen. So the Cecil Hotel is an infamous hotel. It pops up in a lot of true crime stories. So it is located at 640 South Main Street in Los Angeles in the Skid Row area. There are 700 guest rooms. They actually renamed it Stay on Main in 2011, but all of the advertisements, the website, the building signs still refer to it as the Cecil Hotel until November 2013, which, you know, some people laugh about and they're like, you know, they're just being lazy. But remember, this is an impoverished area. They probably didn't have the money to get all new signage, all new advertising going, you know, pay their web developer to update the website. They were doing a bare minimum. So even though the name had legally changed, it was not known really that the name had changed. And the reason they wanted to change the name anyway was to kind of distance from the reputation of the Cecil Hotel, because it has housed so many terrible people and things since it opened its doors in 1927. And this includes not just normal murderers, but serial killers. And it's also had a huge number of suicides. It's also been a drug den. There's been a lot of prostitution, you know, just a ton of not good stuff happening at this hotel in a very impoverished area. So the first documented suicide was of a person named W.K. Norton in 1931. He ended up ingesting poison capsules. So the hotel had been open for 4 years when this happened. You know, a tragedy, sad, nothing to really write home about. A lot of hotels, including hotels that I've personally stayed in, have had murders or suicides or strange events happen. The problem with the Cecil is things kept happening. So there were a ton of other suicides that went on between the 1930s and 1940s. A lot of people wondered if it was, you know, kind of a bandwagon effect where people would read in the newspaper or hear on the radio someone killed themselves at the Cecil, and then someone goes to the Cecil and says, I'll do this too, and they purposely book at the Cecil and then commit suicide. Another thing is a lot of people, you know, suicide can be like a very sudden thing, but a lot of people do think, I don't want cleanup for my family. I don't want my family to find me like this. Even if it's not a messy suicide, even if it's, you know, something a little more tame like pills or hanging, which I mean still isn't great to find your loved one at, but not as bad as, you know, suicide by gun. They still want their loved one to find them in that state. So a lot of the thinking is they also thought, you know, I'm gonna go to Skid Row, it's far away from where my family is, and then, you know, the hotel staff, unfortunately, will be the ones who find them there. But then things start to get even weirder, and we move past just suicide. So in 1944, there was a young woman, I think she was around 27 or so, named Dorothy Jean Purcell, and she gave birth to a live baby boy. For some reason, she thought he was a stillborn, and so she threw him out a window, because that's, of course, what you do with a baby, whether it's alive or dead, you just throw it out the window. Yeah. Dorothy. In 1947, Elizabeth Short was seen drinking at the Cecil Hotel's bar shortly before her famous murder. So if anyone doesn't know, Elizabeth Smart is known as the Black Dahlia. She's someone we'll cover on the show later on, but the last known sighting of her was drinking at this bar. Another big unfortunate incident in 1962, there was a woman named Pauline Otten who jumped from the 9th floor while she was arguing with her estranged husband. They were a young couple, they hadn't been married for long, and in the heat of the moment, she just leapt from her hotel room. She's like, I'm done with you and with life. And unfortunately, as she landed down below, she landed on a man named George Giannini, and they were both killed instantly. So she committed suicide, like manslaughter suicide. It's not a murder suicide, but like manslaughter suicide accidentally. Poor George, just wrong place, wrong time. So then we get into even more sinister stuff. In 1964, there was a retired telephone operator named Pigeon Goldie Osgood who was found raped and stabbed and beaten in her ransacked room. That is still an unsolved murder. They've never solved her murder, and it's been, you know, what, like 56 years, almost 57 years. And then in the 1980s, a serial killer known as the Night Stalker, his legal name was Richard Ramirez, he used the Cecil as his hideout base in between his murders. So when it was time to commit a murder, he would book a room at the Cecil, and then he would go and do the killings, then he'd go back to the Cecil and lay low for a bit, and then go back to his daily life, rinse, lather, repeat, until he was eventually caught. The problem with reporting any kind of murders, serial killings, suicides, anything is, as I've said before, there are copycats. So in 1991, there was a Night Stalker copycat named Jack Unterweger who stayed at the Cecil, and he would bring back sex workers, and he would rape and strangle them at the Cecil and just kind of leave them there. Really, really nice Jack. He was eventually arrested. He was expedited back to Austria, and he hung himself in his jail cell before his sentence could begin, because of course, if you're going to be a serial killer with a hideout at the Cecil, why would you not, you know, hang yourself? It fits the protocol for this creepy hotel. For Elisa, it was unknown if she knew of the hotel's history or if she did, how much she knew, because again, just hearing one or two things happen isn't enough to discourage a lot of people. If you hear how many things happen, you might be discouraged. As I've mentioned before, there's a hotel I stay in all the time in Rosemont, Illinois, right outside of Chicago, that has a big unsolved murder case going on with Kanika Jenkins. And we were staying there before it happened. We stay there after. It is kind of an unsettling feeling knowing, you know, someone died in that hotel, but it's not enough to discourage us. But if there were all of these cases, all of these suicides, serial killings, yeah, we'd find a different hotel. But Elisa, for all we know, she saw it as a cheap place to sleep. Again, she is a young woman. She's taking part in this tour. The West Coast, for anyone unfamiliar, the West Coast of the United States is very expensive. Like, both coasts are expensive, but the West is even more so, because you've got California, and then you've got Washington and Oregon, which are very upscale as well. It's all really touristy, resorty, stuff like that. So she's trying to save money as much as she can, and she just needs a cheap place to sleep. Like, she's not there to have a hotel party. She's there to sleep and then go see the city. Also, at 21, you really do feel invincible. Even if you hear about bad things that have happened, you don't think that could happen to me. And unfortunately, that's why we see a lot of accidental deaths in young adults. Like, even though we're told from a young age, you know, don't drink and drive, don't mix different kinds of drugs, don't overtake your prescriptions, don't do this, don't do that. Like people do a lot of really stupid things as young adults. I know I did. I was never one to like drink and drive and stuff, but I would do a lot of urbexing, like going into abandoned buildings and looking around. And now as a pregnant 30-year-old, I realized that was really stupid and dangerous, but at 21, it was so cool to do with my friends. So even if Elisa knew everything that had happened, there's still a good chance she would have booked it anyway because, hey, it's a cheap place to sleep. So Elisa checks into the Cecil Hotel on January 26, 2013. She wound up being assigned to a hostel-style suite that was with many other women. This was on the 5th floor. Most of them were traveling individually. A few were traveling together with other women, but instead of just a single hotel room, to make things even cheaper, she agreed to this hostel-style sleeping pattern. And the only bad thing I can ever find about Elisa Lam, and it wasn't really specified what happened, comes from this hostel-style setup she had on the 5th floor of the Cecil Hotel. So some of the roommates complained that she exhibited, quote, odd behaviors, and it's never been specified what those are. I can't find anything online about them. I've never heard anything reported on news shows or podcasts or anything about what behaviors they were. Just some of the roommates complained to staff, you know, this girl has weird behaviors. And to keep the peace, to make things easy, Elisa wound up being upgraded to her own private suite on January 28th, so 2 days after she arrived, for no additional cost. So to her, this is a miracle. She checked into this hotel, you know, the skeevy murder hotel that she's sharing with other people to save money, and she just got a free upgrade to a private suite. So go Elisa, or so she thought. Elisa left LA. She continued touring and blogging about her journey. She kept calling her parents every day. She was loving the stuff she did. You know, a lot of things she was interested in beforehand. She was really into kind of the creative scene is what she really soaked up while in LA. So that's the fashion, the food, the museums, things like that. She also toured through Skid Row, and Elisa, again, was a sweet person, so it made her sad. You know, it's unknown how much she knew about Skid Row before she came, but seeing just the plight of these people, like, kind of weighed on her. She made a few posts about that she felt really bad for them, you know, donated some money and meals to some of the people she met. You know, it was a solemn experience. She wasn't doing, you know, the jerk Instagram moment, like taking a selfie in Saints Row. Well, I've been playing that game too much. Taking a selfie in Skid Row, you know, or filming her giving a man a cheeseburger. She just reported this on her own after the fact and was very respectful while she was in this area. So the story takes a turn when we get to January 31st, 2013. So this is when she was supposed to check out of the Cecil and depart from LA to go to Santa Cruz, California. And normally when she would leave, she would call her parents beforehand, which is pretty standard for anyone. Like, you call your friends and family and say, hey, I'm about to head out. And then when you get there, you let them know you arrived safely. So Elisa went past the time she was supposed to check out and her parents hadn't heard from her. They're like, okay, you know, maybe she got a little busy. But the day goes on, they still don't hear from her. They give her a couple of calls, they give her a couple of text messages, still don't hear from her, and they start to get really worried. They also call the hotel at that point, and they realize she's never checked out of the hotel, and staff goes to check, and she's not in the room either. So David and Yenna, remember, they're still up in Vancouver, British Columbia. They call the LAPD and report Elisa as missing. And LAPD actually jumps on this case because they know it's a young girl from Canada who's not like this. She's never had these issues before, who's gone missing in the Cecil Hotel in Skid Row. So they immediately go to the hotel, and the Lambs immediately buy a plane ticket, the first one they can, to fly to LA from Vancouver to search for their daughter. So the problem is everyone was severely limited in what they could do because at this point there was, you know, no reason to think there was any kind of a crime or foul play. They didn't know what was going on, especially this early. So they searched Elisa's room and belongings. They searched, you know, the main areas of the hotel. They searched vacant rooms. They had, you know, dogs, police dogs get Elisa's scent and go through the hotel to look for her, and nothing turned up. And the frustrating thing was, since there was no probable cause of a crime, they could not investigate any occupied rooms. So again, they were looking in vacant rooms, but any rooms where people were in there, the police, the staff, the parents, no one could go in to those rooms. So it created this fear of, if someone is holding her hostage, or if someone's done something to her and, you know, they've stored her in there, we can't check these rooms. We have to wait until people leave and they have time to cover something up before we can really check on what's going on. So everyone starts asking around more. Hotel staff reports, you know, Elisa was always alone, so she did not hang out with any of the hostel roommates. Again, that love interest didn't come. She didn't really make any, I don't mean this in a bad way, but she didn't make any friends or anything there. She was just doing her thing. She was always alone when they saw her. Surveillance of the last few days backed that up. They went to a bookstore next door to the Cecil, which was run by a woman named Katie Orphan, and they interviewed her, showed Elisa's picture, and she actually remembered Elisa. So she said on the morning of January 31st, the day Elisa was supposed to check out and leave, she came in and was shopping for books for her family. And Katie reported she was, quote, outgoing, very lively, and very friendly. And, you know, Elisa's worry was she wanted to get these gifts for her family, but she still had a lot of traveling to do, and she wanted to make sure she had books that wouldn't be too heavy to travel with or take up too much space to travel with. So Katie helped her pick out some books that were great for each individual family member she was shopping for, but also small enough and lightweight enough to not really cause an issue with her travels. Elisa thanked her, she left. Everything was fine, and Katie didn't think anything more of it until she was questioned by the LAPD and heard Elisa was missing, and she was just, you know, no info to give, really. You know, everything was fine when Elisa came into that bookstore. Elisa's original roommates, who had reported the odd behaviors, were also interviewed. Again, nothing new was learned. They just said she had odd behaviors. And again, those have not really been reported on the internet. So they weren't enough to get her kicked out of the hotel or anything. It was just these people didn't like whatever she was doing, and she was assigned to her own room. But they even said, you know, we had no indication to think this girl might go missing. So as much as the staff, her parents, the LAPD were investigating, no new information was gathered. And after 1 week, they decided to bring this more into attention. So I know you guys are thinking like, oh my God, it was a week. But remember, young woman, independent, notably wanted a trip on her own with no one telling her what to do. So it was one of those things where they couldn't report her as missing officially, like to put it out there into the public eye right away, because there was no reason to suspect something was severely wrong. They had to do their initial investigation first, and then once they weren't finding anything, you know, they weren't seeing any activity on her cards or on her phone, then it was time to up the ante. So they start distributing missing persons flyers all over the Cecil, all over Skid Row, and the restaurants and other establishments in Skid Row, and across Los Angeles. They wanted to circulate this in other places. Of course, up in Vancouver at the University of British Columbia, news was circulating there like, hey, if any of y'all hear from Elisa, you know, let us know, she's missing. And this brought the case into the public eye, where people in that area started to talk about it. It was mainly restricted to just the West Coast, but at least the story was getting out there more. Unfortunately, still nothing came from it. So 16 days after she went missing, on February 15th, 2013, it was time for the LAPD to play their trump card. So this is something they had in their possession from the start, but they didn't want to show it because they kind of knew what was going to happen when they showed it. But they were like, we have no other choice. We need to show the last sighting of this girl, what she was wearing, what she was doing, and hope that helps. So they released surveillance video of the last known sighting of Elisa Lam onto the LAPD's YouTube channel, and the world went crazy. Like, this thing went viral. And if you're wondering, because this is also being uploaded as a podcast and not just on YouTube, if you're listening and you don't have the visual, if you're wondering what video I'm talking about, I'm going to tell you it's the elevator video, and I'm sure a lot of you now know what I'm referencing. It's that video, that elevator video with the girl with the red jacket. So this is surveillance footage from one of the Cecil's elevators. It was taken on February 1st, 2013. So remember, she was supposed to have checked out of the hotel by now and gone to Santa Cruz, and she's still in the hotel. So this is an really odd, really spooky video. In it, Elisa is acting very strange. Very, very strange. She's acting erratic. She's acting jumpy. At times looks like she might be talking to someone or gesturing at someone, but no one really knows. And people theorize different things of what is going on with this girl in this video. Some say it seems paranormal, with how she's acting combined with how the rest of this case goes. Some people theorize she was on drugs. You know, she found some good old LA drugs and she's just on drugs. But some theorize she was having a bipolar episode. So Elisa had bipolar disorder, and some people worried that she just had a manic episode and this was the result of it. But one thing everyone can agree on is the video's unsettling. Most people at least get a little bit of heebie-jeebies when they watch it. A lot of people report feeling sick or nauseous. Some people online have said they even cried. It's a very odd video. So I am going to play the video in its entirety for you guys at this time. It is about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. If you don't want to watch the video, or you start watching it and you need to tap out, jump here. I'll put right here the timestamp of when I come back, when the video is done, so you guys can jump to that point and we'll discuss this further. So yeah, super creepy video. You know, it goes viral not only in the United States but worldwide. A lot of, you know, if you guys don't know, a lot of websites we get in the Western countries are not available in China. China has a lot of their own versions of things like YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, and their, you know, platforms even picked it up and were showing it, like, look what happened with this girl, look what she's doing. So it became a phenomena, and unfortunately, for as big of the exposure as this video got, no one could still find Elisa. So people now knew what she looked like. They were obsessed with the story. They were looking into the story, but still nothing was coming in that could help to find her. Around this time, odd phenomena began happening across the hotel. So the first thing was, you know, guests were reporting that the water pressure in the rooms was becoming intermittently low. Like sometimes it was okay, sometimes it was normal, and sometimes it'd be very weak. And also the water had a mild discoloration. Depending on who you ask, it could be just a little bit of discoloration or coming out almost black. And some people even took pictures of what they were seeing and they reported this to the hotel staff. Some people who also, you know, had some of the water to brush their teeth or something like that reported that it tasted funny. One couple reported that it tasted, quote, sweetie, and that's not a typo, that it had a sweet taste to it. And so just more and more people were reporting the issues with the water pressure, the discoloration, and the odd taste to the staff. The staff unfortunately did very little to help because remember they're in Skid Row, and so their response was basically just like, this is a cheap hotel in Skid Row. What do you expect? Like, do you expect Class A treatment with the water? Because that's not going to happen. It's just water. Like, it'll be fine. There's nothing going on. And unfortunately, most patrons agreed, and they just went about their time at the Cecil. They're like, yeah, this is a really poor area. It's not going to be kept up that well. But enough people complained that after a week of this, the staff decided to check out the water system just for peace of mind and almost like an I told you so. Like, they wanted something where they could say, look, we investigated, nothing's going on. You're just in Skid Row, deal with it. Like, they wanted just proof to get people off their back. So they send an employee by the name of Santiago Lopez to investigate. So Santiago had been employed by the Cecil for 3 years as a maintenance employee, and he was also of the agreement, like, yeah, the water's always sucked here. It's sucking a little more right now, but it's the Cecil. So he, like the rest of staff, was not concerned about this, but he's like, okay, fine, I'll be the one to go investigate. So on February 19th, she's been missing for almost 3 weeks at this point, like a day short of 3 weeks. He takes the elevator to the 15th floor, and then he takes the staircase the rest of the way to the roof. He turns off the rooftop alarm, and then he ascends onto the platform where there are 3 giant water tanks. And I'm not exaggerating when I say giant. So each tank is huge. Remember, there are, you know, 700 rooms, so a lot of rooms need to be powered by this. So there are 1,000 gallons in each water tank. On top of each tank is a 20-pound steel lid to keep everything secure. And there are also no ladders inside or outside of the tank. So there's not really a way to access it unless you go up to access it. So Santiago knows this. He brings his own ladder. He gets on top of the platform, puts the ladder up, goes up and investigates the first tank, you know, moves the lid to the side. Nothing's amiss, you know, everything's working as it should be. So he goes to the second tank, nothing's going on. He's down to 2 left, he's almost done. He's thinking about, you know, his nice little lunch that he's gonna eat after this. And he goes to the third tank and he looks down and sees a naked Asian woman floating face up. She's about 12 inches submerged below the surface of the tank, like the water in the tank, and the tank is about 3/4 of the way full. So he's looking at her, she's looking at him, and he's like, oh. So he immediately reports, like, hey guys, it's not just our crappy water. Like, I just think I found the missing girl. So hotel management freaks out. They call the LAPD. The LAPD freaks out. They call the Los Angeles Fire Department. And then the fire department comes and they end up needing to drain the tank completely. So it had like 750 gallons of water left in it. They drained all of that out and then they cut it completely open. And this was necessary because the maintenance hatch on the top, you know, it's technically big enough for someone small to get in and out, but they did not want to disturb the body more than it already had been. They wanted to preserve it and keep it in good shape and not risk any additional damage where they couldn't say, oh, is that where we banged her head, or had her head been banged already? So they had to cut it open from the bottom to get the right tools in to remove the body in perfect condition. Along with the body in the water, there were clothes, there was a watch, and there was a room key. And the body was positively identified as missing woman Elisa Lam. The clothes were the clothes she was wearing in the elevator video. The watch was confirmed by her family to be hers, and the room key was the room key she had been assigned when she was reassigned to that private suite. So 2 days later, on February 21st, 2013, the cause of death was determined by the coroner. It was determined to be an accidental drowning with bipolar disorder as a significant factor, and we'll get into that in just a moment. So he also noticed that her body was covered with a sand-like particulate, and that the clothes in the tank, which again matched the clothes in the elevator video, had the same, you know, sand-like particulate on them and in the same amount. So it was clear, yes, she was wearing these clothes when she entered the tank. And basically what he said is, you know, she did drown. She was alive when she got in this tank and she drowned. But they also looked at the rest of the body. So she had moderate decomposition and bloating, you know, after being in the tank for about 3 weeks. There was a greenish tint to her skin. There was some marbling and some skin separation going on. And all of these things are normal for 3 weeks of decomposition. For anyone wondering how bodies decompose, especially in water, if you look it up, everything adds up to the way Elisa was found and how she should have been. So, you know, nothing was speeding up the decomp or slowing it down. It wasn't like she had been out of the tank and then put in the tank. She was just in this tank the whole time. They did a rape kit, and there is no sign of sexual assault. With her body, there was no sign of physical trauma, so she hadn't been beaten or stabbed or shot or anything like that. There's no evidence to indicate suicide. Of course, people can look at, you know, toxicology levels to see what's in you. They can look at like the bones in her neck to see anything that happened there. There's nothing to indicate she committed suicide. She did have small traces of alcohol in her system, and by small, it's like she had a glass of wine at dinner and was fine, and it was just, you know, processing out as normal. It's like you have the glass, you're not even tipsy, but it's still going to show up in your system for like the next 8 hours or whatever. And there's also 0 traces of any kind of drug. So even marijuana was not in her system. But of course, you know, party drugs like cocaine and ecstasy and stuff, none of that was in her. So there was nothing mixing around that could have caused this to happen drug-wise. But the interesting thing the coroner found, which is why he ruled it as bipolar as a significant factor, is she only had traces of Wellbutrin, Lamictal, Seroquel, and Effexor in her system. So I mentioned Elisa did grow up with bipolar disorder. It's something it wasn't like a severe bipolar disorder, so she kept it to like, if you have to know, you know, so only her best friends and her immediate family knew she was bipolar. Most people had no idea. She was able to control it with these 4 drugs. It was on a need-to-know basis, and 99% of people didn't need to know. The problem is these were daily meds, but only traces were in her system. So she randomly stopped taking these cold turkey, and that could have immediately led to a bipolar episode, which again, remember, some people said from the elevator video, it looks like she's having like some kind of manic delusion. That could be from going cold turkey off these drugs. So you would think at this point, the case is solved. You know, she stopped taking her drugs, she had a bipolar episode, she unfortunately hallucinated her way into the tank, and she drowned. And that would be a tragic story, but it'd be a case closed. And that's not what's happening, because there's some other factors at play. So, remember the tanks. Let's go over the tanks in more detail. How did she access these tanks? So, this is how you access the tank. You have to take the elevator at the Cecil to the 15th floor, and then you have to climb the fire escape to the roof, which again, you know, people can do that. Those 2 steps are very doable. But then you have to deactivate the alarm, and only staff has the key to deactivate it. So she would have had to get the key from someone. And again, at this point, people say in the video, it looked almost like she was talking to someone, and how do we know she didn't find a key or get the key or steal the key earlier in the day? Again, possible. But then you're on the roof, and you have these tall platforms you have to climb up, and then there's not a ladder there. So where did this chick get a ladder? So, and then where did the ladder go? So she would have needed to climb onto the platform, bring a ladder with her this whole way, and then push it up against the tank, climb to the top, and then move the 20-pound steel lid. And, you know, 20 pounds isn't much. Like, people work out with that all the time. But, you know, this girl is clearly, no offense meant by this phrasing, but not in her right mind at this point, whether it's bipolar or paranormal or she's being chased or whatever. When you see that video, she is not in her right mind. So moving that lid and thinking all of this up along the way is very far-fetched. And then to top it off, she's got to jump down the hatch into the water, and then the tank was only 3/4 of the way full, so she couldn't just reach up and grab the steel lid and close it. So somehow she would have had to grow longer arms and close that lid. So it becomes a thing where it's almost like there has to be an accomplice. There has to be someone who helped her get onto the roof and then helped her get in the tank, and then they closed the lid on her and took the ladder and did all of this without getting caught on any surveillance camera. So it's just crazy. This case remains an unsolved mystery. We're going along 8 years for this happening. It'll be 8 years next month. Again, the most likely cause is a bipolar episode, but there's so many questions left unanswered still. Again, it doesn't explain how she got in the tank. It doesn't explain where another person would have been all this time. Someone off scene that did all of this without getting caught. You know, that's why people say, oh, it's paranormal. She was playing the elevator game, which I've got a video about that too, if you have no idea what the elevator game is. But people say that, and that's something where normally it'd be immediately thrown out. And unfortunately, you know, questions like that have been allowed to linger for 8 years because there is no good explanation. So when people say, oh, she played this scary Korean game, it's a game originated in Korea. I know she's Chinese, but the elevator game originated in Korea. People will say, oh, she played this Korean elevator game and transported into another world and found her way into the tank. Oh my God. And for some reason, people can't immediately just be like, no, stop it, bad. Like, that makes no sense, because this case is so weird and so creepy. It has so many unanswered things that paranormal is still on the table and allowed to linger all this time. Elisa's phone was also never recovered. No one knows where it is. It never put out any signal or anything. So if someone stole it, they immediately managed to deactivate it without it pinging a tower. So who knows where that went to. Her now deactivated blog, Nouveau Nouvelle, continued to update for about a year after her death, which was very creepy. Now, Tumblr has a scheduled post option, which a lot of people use. I schedule a ton of posts for my stuff, so, you know, 99% sure that's all it was. But it could have been someone who managed to not ping a tower, got access to her phone, and was posting things. Or, as the paranormal squad says, was it a message from the beyond. So this, you know, is just a very, very strange case with a lot of twists and turns. The Cecil Hotel, remember, had changed its name legally 2 years before this. They officially changed its signage and advertisements and websites to say stay on Main. And a couple months after Elisa's body was recovered, to try to detract from the attention. Of course, it didn't work because the case had gone viral. So people were watching the hotel. People, after she was found, were staying at the hotel, and they had to sign waivers saying they're not, the staff is not responsible for anything that happens to these people in regards to the water or anything like that while they're there. But it was like a hot den, and people knew immediately, like, oh, this is Stay on Main now. So people know what this place is. If you Google Stay on Main, most of the stuff that comes up is for the Cecil. Two guests, Gloria and Stephen Cott, filed a class action lawsuit, which meant any other guest could join in because it was class action. It's like, if you were there during this time, you can join the lawsuit. For medical bills and refunds. They did this about a week after Elisa's body was found because, remember, they were drinking and using and showering in the decomposition water for their stay there. So, first of all, they want their stay refunded because staff kept just poo-pooing it and saying nothing's going on. But then also, on top of that, when they immediately left the Cecil, they went to their doctor and had blood work done, tests done, stuff like that to make sure they were safe. The Cecil staff put out a notice that the amounts of decomposition in the water, yes, was disgusting, but was not enough to hurt someone. And I don't care if that's medically sound or not. Psychologically, that's messed up. And that's what most people, including the Cotts, thought. Like, no, like, this is not okay. I don't care if medically it's not going to affect me. Psychologically, it's going to affect me. So, they filed their lawsuit and they won. Anyone who stayed at the Cecil was entitled to get their medical bills comped and to get their stay refunded. I don't know if that includes therapy bills, because I know some of these people, of course, went to therapists after. Hopefully so, but if not, at least like your physical body medical bills were covered. Unfortunately, the Lambs also found a negligence lawsuit in September 2013 saying because of the Cecil's history, they knew something like this could happen and their daughter would be alive if, they did a better job. I feel terrible because these are grieving parents, and so do most people, but 2 years later, the case was dismissed by a judge because, of course, the Cecil had no idea this specific thing could happen. They didn't know these specific events could happen. They didn't have anyone who even came close to doing this in the past. After this happened, people would routinely try to sneak on the roof and make YouTube videos if they were successful, but they couldn't get to the tank, of course. But there had never been anything to indicate that this tragedy could occur. It was always murderers and suicides. There's not much you can do to prevent that. So, the judge was sympathetic, the staff was sympathetic, but if you take a step back, as sad as it is, it's like, yeah, the Lambs didn't really have a case. There's nothing more to go on to make it into a case. And unfortunately, that's where this story ends. It's solved but unsolved. No one can answer the questions of the tank or anything else that happened. So this story has continued to remain in pop culture. There have been movies and books, including an episode of ABC show Castle based on this case. It fascinates people. It's because it's something you can theorize on your own or with friends and just keep it talking. Was there someone else? Was it paranormal? Was it bipolar? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? What about this? Why was the Cecil such a hot magnet for all these terrible things to begin with? Was it built on some kind of burial ground or something that's caused all this bad juju since it started? No one knows these things, and that's why this case is so huge. That's one of the reasons it's one of the cases that's always stuck with me, and I hope you guys learned a lot more about Elisa Lam today, and that it got you thinking. It's always it's always good, especially for a case that's not fully resolved, for it to get someone thinking, because someone out there might know more, and that one little detail you know could crack this wide open. So as usual, if you know anything about this case that could help, be sure to report it to the LAPD so that we can help the Lam family. It's been almost a decade of this for them, which is terrible. So anything we can do to help would be great. And I do, of course, want to thank you guys for watching this episode of Chew on That. Be sure to leave a comment on what you think about the Elisa Lam case. Had you heard it before? Is this the first time you heard it? Do you know anything about the elevator game? Again, if not, I have a video on this channel to explain the elevator game. And, you know, be sure to like the video. That gets the video out there to more people. And hit subscribe. That way you get all of the latest Chew on That episodes. You get all of the latest bonus videos like the elevator game. And you also get my life updates, you know, baby life, pet mom life, stuff like that. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will catch you next time.